An Extra Knife at Dinner, a Gabrielle Ibrahim mystery. An audio series by Patricia Asedegbega Nieto. Episode 6. As predicted, Funke arrived a good 45 minutes late to the appointment. She was ushered in by Pauline, who Gabrielle told could go home for the day. The new arrival looked from Chooks to Gabrielle, clearly suspicious, and refusing to sit when she was invited to do so. "I already told you everything I know. I don't understand why you asked me to come," Funke said to Gabrielle in an accusatory manner, evidently understanding the reason for her being summoned, without a word needing to be exchanged. Chooks took over the interrogation, clearly impatient with the young woman's attitude. "Funke, right? I don't know if you understand how serious the charge of attempted murder is. You might find yourself implicated if an arrest is made. For example, if you encouraged Antonia's plans, helped get her in touch with anyone, or—" "I did no such thing. Why would I help someone kill another person?" Funke asked, looking at them both. "No, you can't involve me in this. I was against the idea from the beginning. Why do you think we stopped being friends? Where is Antonia, by the way? She should be here, and she should tell the truth. She wouldn't dare deny it in my presence." "She's gone away for a bit. I found out that she hired someone to kill me," Gabrielle told her. "She says that she changed her mind later on, but I have to know if it's true." She decided to try a different approach. If she allowed Chooks to lead the interrogation in his brusque manner, the girl could clam up, which was the last thing they needed. "You were her best friend for a long time. Help me understand if Antonia belongs in jail like her mother. Are they both cut from the same pattern? You know better than anyone what she's capable of and how far she's willing to go to get what she wants." Funke took a long look at her and then occupied the sofa opposite theirs. "I don't know. I want to believe that in the end, common sense would take over and she'd desist from carrying out such a horrific plan, but I really have no idea." You think you know someone, and then things happen and you find out that you really don't. "Look, her mother's focus was always on your father and the business. Antonia never came first, second or third for anyone, ever. I remember she loved theatre when we were teenagers. Her parents didn't come once to watch her act. One year on prize-giving day, she was to be awarded for a stellar performance. Her mum came, and Antonia was beaming. I don't even think that 10 minutes had elapsed when I saw her answer her phone, then get up and leave, even before Antonia was called to the stage. My parents congratulated her and asked her where her dad was. She said he was out of the country, and on our way home, we saw him being driven somewhere by his chauffeur. I remember my dad asking, 'Is that not the man who's supposed to be travelling?' I recall on numerous occasions coming over and her mum ranting about you with anything but love. They called you the intruder. They hid letters you sent to your father from him, Christmas cards too, and when you'd call, he was never available. Antonia hated you, but her mother had a lot to do with nurturing that hatred. It felt like you got the best of everything." "How?" Gabrielle interrupted. "My tuition was paid for, and I was given an allowance that I stopped as soon as I got my first job after uni. But that was about all the care I got from my father. How was my life any better? I was put in a boarding school and only allowed home on rare occasions. Whatever I am today, I have the nuns that run the school to thank. I still go and see them every year. They made me feel loved and wanted. They gave me values, taught me how to pray, how to work in an ethical manner, and how to respect myself and others. How did my father treat me better than he did Antonia?" Funke was quiet for a moment, ruminating on Gabrielle's words, then sighed. "When you put it like that. Anyway, Antonia's always hated you, and then you come back and her mother goes to jail. For a crime, Funke. She was arrested for kidnapping and a number of other charges, none of them minor. I didn't come back and wickedly put her in jail because of my influence and power. Surely even Antonia understood that," Gabrielle asked, wondering if she was the one living in some kind of alternate reality. "Yes, but Antonia was left all alone during the trial," Funke said. "I couldn't even be with her. My parents didn't approve of our association after everything came out, and I sort of saw her in secret." After the sentencing, Antonia's hate increased, and she started talking about having you killed. At first I humoured her, but it got to a point where it was all she talked about. She was obsessed, and sounded like a broken record. Once at a party, she started saying things after one drink too many, and that was the final straw for me. When I visited her the following week, I tried to make her understand that it was hard enough being seen with her, and that when she made those statements, people would think she was her mother's daughter, and not another victim of hers. We'd been making an effort for people to see her in that light, and she was just thwarting those efforts every time she opened her mouth. I must say, people tend to excuse almost anything when one is influential, and after the initial shock, your father's position in society was opening doors for her again. Antonia looked me in the face and said, "Oh, but I am my mother's daughter. Can't you see it?" I felt a chill run down my spine. Then I said things, she said things, I shouted, she shouted. "It feels like I'm watching a game of squash. Honestly, you lot just keep hitting and hitting the same wall," Chuck said. "Gabrielle, I can guarantee you that when Antonia was saying she hated you, Funke was not listening in silence. That's not how it works. Like my mother would say, she probably added salt, pepper and seasoning to an already explosive mix. Even from what you just said, Funke, you basically admitted to leaving her on her own when things went south after others had done the same. You, her childhood friend, knowing that she suffered from a lack of affection and attention and was very fragile. Honestly, you shared the blame all around and skipped yourself. You saw Antonia was becoming more dangerous by the day, yet you chose to walk away, not even considering telling someone what was happening. Don't put Gabrielle in the same sack both of you were in. Who did Antonia contact to get the job done? Come up with an answer different from, 'I don't know.'" He looked steadily at the girl, whose mouth hung open in shock. "I have no idea." "Look, it wasn't the first time she wished you dead. Yes, I said things too. When your friend's going through something, you support her, but those were just words, like we'd said many, many times before. I don't have those kinds of connections. Why on earth would I know criminals? We stopped being close months ago. You'll have to ask the people she started hanging around with, now that I think about it. At that party your father hosted a few months back, Gabrielle, Antonia was unusually quiet. She didn't take her eyes off Alex and you. Your relationship really made her mad. Antonia believed that had it not been for you, Alexander Jacobs would be hers." Funke shot Gabrielle a knowing smile. Gabrielle avoided looking at Chooks, not wanting to give more explanations that would make her family look worse than it did, which would be difficult if one was being honest. Yet the man did not ask her any questions. Perhaps he was pondering the wisdom of getting involved with such a crazy family. "So you know of absolutely no one that could have helped Antonia's plan materialize from a mere fantasy. Ponder your next answer. Is there anything you're leaving out?" he asked, and the girl shook her head as he observed her. "After the huge fight, she started hanging out with Basola, who became her shadow, and I heard they frequented different clubs than we had. I suggest you speak to her new circle of friends. Look, I know that what Antonia did was very wrong, and I probably should have done more than cut her off, but I really didn't think that she'd go that far. Please drop this. It'll only cause more hurt. I have to leave now. My boyfriend's waiting outside to take me home." Funke looked pleadingly at both of them, like she was expecting to be stopped, and then walked out of the room when nothing else was said. Gabrielle scrolled through Antonia's phone. "The first to call this number was made the night of the party my dad gave. It lasted less than a minute. The next was made 3 days later after the OK she got in reply to her follow-up message." Gabrielle sat next to Chooks, and they scrolled down and read the messages again. "Compare the guest list. Who was at both parties? Or maybe it's even more important to ask who wasn't invited to yours, but was at the other," Chooks suggested. "Look, something at that first party tipped Antonia over the edge. I sensed it had to do with this Alex guy, but if it wasn't her, you and your friends were at both places. It might be nothing, but it's the only common denominator you have. Who else could have had a grudge against you or your family? I haven't had time to look you up, but you seem to belong to the circle of the very rich and famous. You guys seem to accumulate a lot of enemies, and you probably don't even make any special effort not to." Gabrielle stared at him, unable to hide her shock at his words. What on earth had he meant by "you guys"? The bell ringing stopped her from replying. "Good evening. Sorry I'm a bit late. You know how the traffic in Lagos gets." Gabrielle nodded, her mind still on what had just been said to her as she escorted Basola to the living room. As had happened with Funke, Chucks's presence threw the visitor off balance. "When did you last hear from Antonia?" Chucks asked the woman. Gabrielle thought to herself that small talk was definitely not his thing. "I've been calling her, but she hasn't come back to me yet," Basola replied, her inquisitive gaze still on the man who had asked the question. "You don't seem particularly worried about that fact. Maybe because you know where she is?" Chucks asked. With a head movement and a shrug, Basola gave her answer. Gabrielle observed her. She was Antonia's age, average build, her skin the tone of ebony, and her hair was braided with the ends of the hair extensions curled. Like Funke and Antonia, she was covered in designer brands, like an official ambassador. "I really don't. I've called and left messages," Basola said. "We were meant to attend a party on Saturday, but she does that sometimes, goes silent for days, and then resurfaces. I guess from your questions she isn't here either." "I understand you both made an appearance at Mrs. Deji's party, but you didn't stay long. Can you tell me why?" Gabrielle asked, choosing not to comment on what the woman had said. "Is anything wrong?" "Being summoned here, I thought I'd get to see her, that maybe she was unwell, and that's actually why I came." Basola was looking at them both in a very suspicious manner, and Gabrielle decided to try to put her at ease in order to get as much information as she could from her, without giving anything away. "She's away for a few days, but I'm worried about her, and being that you seem to be her best friend at the moment, I thought I could ask you," she said. "Where are my manners? What can I offer you? A glass of wine, perhaps?" Basola smiled and nodded, and Gabrielle walked to the bar situated in the corner of the room. A few minutes later, the visitor was happily munching on some sandwiches and sipping from a glass of wine. "You were about to tell us about the party. So, you ladies didn't stay long?" Chucks asked, showing visible signs of impatience. "I've been begging my parents to take us along," Basola said. "Antonia knew that Alex would be there, and where he goes, we go, but my mum was unable to get us an invite. She said Mrs. Deji had refused point-blank to make an exception, something about limited attendance and seating arrangements. Anyway, the day of the party, my parents suddenly became indisposed, and my mother said it would be rude not to have any family representation. So she sent us there. Funnily enough, Antonia barely paid any attention to Alex when we got there." The woman frowned. "What did she do?" Gabrielle asked. "She went around the room as if looking for someone, then stopped at the table you were supposed to be seated at and seemed to examine the glasses for some reason. She exchanged a few words with someone, but I couldn't tell who, as at that minute my George walked in and there was a woman that wasn't me clinging to his arm." At those words, Chuck shook his head. Gabrielle could not for the life of her understand the interest either woman had for George. "Anyway, I went to the table to take a better look at the woman, and that was when I saw Antonia switching 2 glasses. Basola explained. "I have no idea why she did that. Sometimes she does strange things. Anyway, I said hello to George, and he introduced me to his companion. Her name was Naomi. I hadn't seen her around before, and knowing him, she wouldn't be in his life for long either, so I wasn't extremely bothered, but I still checked her out. She was pretty, but not his type, Not sophisticated or expensively dressed, and her braids were due to be changed. Anyway, a few minutes later you walked in, and Antonia said it was better we left. A friend was having a party at a club and had invited us. I wanted to stay, but not on my own, so we went to greet the celebrant, give her the gift on behalf of my parents and express their regrets for not attending, and then we left. And Antonia stayed with you in the club the whole time? Chooks asked. Yes, she came back to my house with me and left the next morning. When we went down for breakfast, my mum told us what had happened at the party. Happy that their illness had prevented them from attending and that we'd left early. She'd called me the previous evening to ask where we were, but hadn't gone into detail about what happened. Please write down the name of the club and any people that you can remember that saw you both, Gabrielle requested, handing the younger woman a pen and paper. Basola for the first time looked properly worried as she stared at both Gabrielle and Chooks. What exactly are you planning? Antonia said you were trying to harm her. Now you bring me here and ask a lot of questions, and I haven't heard from her in days. She's just away for a few days. If I speak to her, I'll ask her to call you, Gabrielle replied. I was told that she was at the party, and I wanted to find out her movements. She'd been acting strangely and didn't come home till the next day, so now I know that she was with you. Whilst at the party, did you see anything out of the ordinary? Anyone that surprised you? Maybe the robbers were already there mingling with the crowd, and we were none the wiser. It really was a good thing that you ladies left on time. You have no idea how scary and chaotic it became. Yes, I was angry with Antonia at first when she suddenly cut our stay short. But when my mum explained what had happened and how some of her friends had to go to the hospital and had been hit and pushed, 2 people were even shot. I was grateful to her, Basola said. To be honest, I concentrated my powers of observation more on the Naomi woman and took a few photographs of her to investigate her later on. I did notice a particular waiter who was carrying a tray of drinks, but when I reached for one, he apologised and said that he was on his way back to the kitchen. But moments later, when I reached for a glass from another waiter, I saw that he was still standing nearby with the same tray. He seemed to be studying the occupants of the room. Look, this is him. She scrolled through her phone and pointed the waiter out in a photograph. Can you send the photographs to my phone? I'm trying to make sense of what happened that evening. 2 of my friends were shot. Maybe these can help shed some light, Gabrielle asked. Sure, and if you find out anything about Naomi, let me know. One has to know one's enemy well. I took some photographs of Antonia when we came in front of the photocall by the entrance. I'll send them to you too. She was looking really pretty. Basola threw Gabrielle a look. She was daring her to dispute that fact. A few moments later, Basola took her leave, and Gabrielle saw her off. When she got back to Chooks, he was scrolling through his phone. I see that you're worth a lot of money. Looking you up right now, Chooks said. You're a tie for first place in the list of wealthiest Africans, and here I was being myself around you, not genuflecting or anything. Guess your friends are all in the same category. It's no wonder the robbers stuck to your table. Somehow I find it difficult imagining you being anyone but yourself around anyone, Gabrielle replied, and the man laughed out loud. He really did not do that enough, she thought. It changed his countenance completely. He looked up at her. So, in summary, Alexander Jacobs and you seem to be an item. Your sister's smitten with him, and that's hurt your already very fragile relationship even more. Are you sure you want to dig deeper? This is really a recipe for disaster. I can't see it ending well. More than ever, the fact that she was changing glasses validates her story, and that waiter's suspicious, Gabrielle replied. I'll send the photograph to my personal assistant, as she's going to visit the catering company tomorrow. And though I don't owe you an explanation, like you didn't give me one about your ex that went to the party, Alex and I are not an item, she added, not sure why she felt the need to clarify that last point. Fine, it's my day off tomorrow, so I'll go to the club and get back to you, Chooks said. Try and get a statement from all your friends. We can meet in 2 days and see if we've made any progress. I have to go now. I promised my mother I'd pop in and see her, and it's quite late." He got up and she walked him to the door in silence, thinking that she could not live in peace until she knew. Had her sister tried to kill her? Or was it just a series of unfortunate coincidences? So I go away for my first proper holiday in over 27 years, and you decide to attend a party that almost got you killed. Gabrielle listened, half asleep. Only her father could call at 6 a.m. with recrimination in the form of a greeting, and see nothing wrong with it. "Good morning, Father. That was well over a week ago. As you can see, it was just a scare," Gabrielle replied. "Just a scare? Weren't 2 people from your table shot?" he demanded. "The Jeji boy and your friend Sandra. I can't believe that Antonia was the sister with the good sense this time. I thought you were a low-profile person. Why on earth did you go to that party full of show-offs and cockatoos? I only found out yesterday. Good thing your mother isn't friends with them. I've been able to keep the news from her. It would have worried her." Gabrielle smiled. It was a known fact that her father had very little patience for the superficial chatter of parties or social gatherings, and, had they been invited, he would have most certainly declined, without even feeling the need to look for a plausible excuse. "And how's the holiday going?" Gabrielle asked. Andrew Ibrahim continued to complain. "Your mother tortures me at meal times. I order one thing and she tells the waiter to bring something else, as if I can't decide for myself what's best for me. Once a day she insists we have a salad. I think I've developed 3 more stomachs from all the grass I've eaten. Then she goes to Mass daily, but that's not what I'm complaining about. We walked there yesterday. The church was 2 kilometres from our hotel. I still don't understand why we couldn't take a taxi and help the country's economy. That would be the Christian thing to do, but she wasn't convinced by the speech I gave. Oh, and every day there's an excursion planned. She says we need to imbibe ourselves in the culture of whichever city we're in. I have culture coming out of my ears. Can't we see the places online? So much technology around us, and I still have to put in the physical work." "Father, walking's good for you. Plus, you have the option of taking a taxi yourself. I'm sure you arrive incredibly irritated, which can't be a good disposition for prayer." Gabrielle chuckled. She knew that her father enjoyed watching her mother rediscover the world, even if it meant him suffering, just never in silence. It wasn't even an option that had crossed his mind. "And leave her to walk on her own? No," was the firm answer her father gave. "Father, seeing that you're in such an agreeable mood, I have the list of those invited to the party. Can you tell me if any of them have had issues with you, or if it surprises you that they were invited?" Gabrielle asked. "Why? Gabrielle, I hope you're not getting entangled in anything fishy like the last time. Leave the investigating to the police. If anyone has to risk their lives, it should be them." He was roaring in anger, but still listened as his daughter read out the list. "No, the usual crowd. Glad I was away," he said. "There's no way that I could have suffered Chief Affairy's glare across the room all evening. I must say, it was a very clever moment to plan a robbery. People must have been wearing millions in jewellery." "An enemy of yours, Father?" Gabrielle asked. "Well, the man doesn't know how to lose gallantly. In the last 3 years we've bid for a series of building contracts, and I beat him hands down. Let's just say that he didn't take it very well, and made a few threats here and there, especially as the last contract was for 150 million naira. And the poor materials he used in one of his buildings that's now having issues was somehow brought to light. Nobody wants to associate their reputation with that." Gabrielle gasped at her father's words. "Aren't you afraid he'll make good on his threats?" "He dares not to do anything to me directly. He knows that I'll squash him if he does. Hence, he goes around mouthing off, but his work speaks for itself. That man has no business ethics and treats his workers in a deplorable manner. All he cares about is making a profit. Very dishonest fellow." I have to go now. A tour awaits me. A walking one." Without much more preamble, her father hung up. Of course he wouldn't go for my father. But what about me? Would I not be a suitable enough revenge? Gabrielle wondered out loud and sighed. Gabrielle, what a lovely and unexpected surprise. When you called, I knew that I had to change my dentist appointment. One never feels any form of enthusiasm towards that and looks for the tiniest of reasons not to go. Please, have a seat. What can I offer you? Gabrielle said she was fine, but something was ordered from the kitchen anyway. How are you feeling? Gabrielle asked Claire Jacobs. I understand that you fell when everyone was rushing out after the party. Oh, I'm fine. I got looked over, and aside from a splitting headache, no harm was done. But it was a terrible evening. The woman shook her head worriedly. Poor Philo, after all the effort she put into the party, and we didn't even get to cut the cake, which had about 10 tiers placed on different levels. At first, when they came in and asked us not to move, I thought it was part of the show. I was actually amused until that man asked me to put my earrings and watch into the bag. Then I looked around, took a closer look at them. Those were real guns. I just gave them what they wanted. There was no way that I was going to put my life in danger over jewellery. Cynthia Okafor said she wasn't giving them her necklace, and the man just yanked it off her. I'm so glad my bag was on the chair, and they didn't see it. That would have been painful to lose. One of your creations that I bid for? A narrow escape. After seeing what was done to Cynthia, nobody at our table uttered another word. Oh, I was so scared when the shots rang out, seeing the blood on Mark and your friend. Thank God that they're okay. What a dreadful evening. Yes, the scene that unfolded seemed to be taken out of a horror movie, Gabrielle mused. I hope the police make headway. It was just so unexpected at such an intimate gathering. Did you notice anything strange, or anyone that shouldn't have been there? Someone must have given out information, difficult as it might seem considering the invite list. I've been thinking about exactly the same thing, the woman said. I've known the ladies on my table for a long time. They're all successful and reputable business owners. I just can't see them getting involved in such a thing. I mean, the money wouldn't be worth the scandal. Regarding the second part of your question, we were told it was strictly by invitation, so I was surprised when a +1 wasn't included, yet Yolanda Eremo came with her daughter, Rachel. She sat at Helen's table, Mark's sister, so I thought that she must be a guest of hers. But there was an extra chair at that table. I counted, so her showing up had to be last minute. Those two are up to something. But enough about the party. You know that I've been bursting to ask you a question since the minute you walked in. If there was a table I didn't take my eyes off all evening, it was yours. Nothing happened. You and Alex barely exchanged a word. It was basically the reason that I was looking forward to that party. I told him to make sure he sat next to you. But then I saw that George's date put her bag in the seat next to yours, and Sandra was already glued to your side. I felt the chances for a good and proper conversation slip away. What has my son done? I want no other wife but you for him. Tell me, so I can help fix the problem. Gabrielle had expected this question to be asked at some point. Everyone who had seen them together had hoped for a happy ending. The confusion was only normal, and Claire Jacobs was not a woman to beat around the bush. Gabrielle met her gaze, knowing that she had to pick her words carefully. There were things she was not ready to share with anyone. Mrs. Jacobs, Alex has done nothing wrong, really, she replied. There's absolutely nothing to fix. Yes, we did have a special relationship, but things got complicated at my end, and absolutely no fault of his. I wish I could say what you want me to, but I have no idea how long I need in order to sort things out, and I've asked him to move on with his life because I have no idea when I'll get my normal back, or if I ever will. He deserves to build the life he wants in his own time, not mine. No one is moving on from this relationship, Claire insisted. Look, for the first time in ages, Alex is focused, and he's actually made changes in his life. He was enthusiastic about you and made plans. I could finally have an intelligent conversation with the women in his life. Do you really think that I'm willing to trade that for what he never had? This isn't like going back a step or two. It feels like centuries. I don't want the emptiness and lack of direction of his past. It's you we want. We will wait. She folded her arms stubbornly, and Gabrielle laughed out loud. She recalled how her father, once he'd noticed the distance between Alex and her, did not mince words either. He had basically told her that he was waiting for a wedding date to be set just before they took off on their vacation. You'll be one of the first to know if things change, but you said something I'd like you to elaborate on about your friend's daughter. What are they up to? And who are they? I'll let the subject go for now, but only for now, Claire warned. Yolanda's out to get her daughter Rachel a husband, and Philo Deji and she arrived at some sort of agreement before your friend Sandra came into the picture. Rachel and Mark had actually gone on a few dates, so as you can imagine, Philo doesn't like how things are going at all, especially because she and Yolanda have been friends for ages. Both women want the union, and Mark wasn't indifferent to the idea in the beginning. Like Alex, he played the field for a long time, and his parents wanted him to settle down. They made sure he saw quite a bit of Rachel, who's a graduate, an independent woman, and not at all difficult to look at. A word of advice, Gabrielle. Neither Rachel nor her mother are willing to let this one go, and they're not very scrupulous people. Sandra needs to be careful. Claire Jacobs looked at her very seriously as she spoke, and a chill went down Gabrielle's back. If the woman could say that about her own friend, then things were serious. How far do you think they'd be willing to go? Gabrielle asked. As far as they need to, Claire replied. Look, I don't have the particulars, as Yolanda, when I broached the subject, refused to talk about it. Nobody seems to know, but Rachel was engaged to be married to that doctor that runs the clinic Mark and Sandra were taken to after the shooting. 2 weeks before the wedding, it was called off. I mean, literally 2 weeks. Invitations had been sent out. We'd all bought our Asedegbega sonar attires. Everything was picked out and paid for. Then the party planner called us and told us that the wedding had been cancelled. Yolanda and her daughter flew out of the country and didn't pick up our insistent calls. Came back 2 months later and gave no explanation. We all tried to find out. Cynthia and I even feigned illnesses and booked separate appointments with the doctor to see if we could discover what had happened. But that man's hermetic. He just stared back at me when I mentioned that I'd been invited to his wedding. So I quickly went back to inventing symptoms of the imaginary illness that I'd made up. Something tells me that he was the one that ended things. I can't see anyone leaving such a handsome and successful man like him. Claire smiled at her knowingly, and at that moment, Gabrielle knew exactly what she would be doing later that night. To stay up to date with Patricia Asedegbega's work, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications.